Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Masako Toki. I'm a senior project manager of the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies. Thank you so much for joining today's Critical Issues Forum speaker series. I am so excited to have this event. So let me share my screen to do just a brief introduction of what Critical Issues Forum is. So today, I am so thrilled to have amazing speakers for this event with the theme of the power of virtual reality and storytelling, building empathy for a nuclear weapons-free world. We will have a fascinating dialogue on the award-winning documentary On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World, an immersive virtual reality about the 2018 ballistic missile alert in Hawaii. Some of you may remember this incident. On January 13, 2018, 1.4 million people across Hawaii received an SMS from the state's emergency management agency. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Then 38 minutes later, they found out that it was a false alert. This false alert was a wake-up call. The risk of nuclear weapons use is as high as ever since the end of the Cold War. This is extremely timely discussion based on this award-winning documentary film. Can virtual reality contribute to nuclear disarmament? How can storytelling contribute to convey the real threats of nuclear weapons? Let's discuss together. We have amazing speakers and I will introduce them in a bit. But before we start the discussion, I'd like to briefly introduce the Critical Issues Forum, International Disarmament Education Project for high school students, because we do believe that education, especially education for younger generation, is the key to creating a more peaceful world. I would like you to learn a little bit about our education project. The Critical Issues Forum project goals include to help students appreciate different national and cultural perspectives on complex international security issues and contribute to international peace and security, disarmament and nonproliferation, and other social justice endeavors while developing their critical thinking and intercultural communication skills. During the past 2 years, due to the global pandemic, we have conducted our project activities online. We are gradually going back to more in-person events. The speaker series is a creative and innovative product of the remote work during the pandemic with an aim to reach out to a wider audience online to promote disarmament and nonproliferation education. And we will continue the speaker series as part of our outreach efforts because it has been very successful in engaging a wider audience. In normal years, the CIF project conducts an in-person students conference in Monterey, California, where our school is located. In the past, we also had a conference in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan and Vienna, Austria. Student representatives from each CIF high school present their semester-long studies at the spring conference. We also invited amazing guest speakers for the student conferences. Each year, we select a timely topic related to nuclear disarmament. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres states, more education and training opportunities should be established in order to empower young people to be a force for change and disarmament. If you are high school teachers or students and interested in learning more about the Critical Issues Forum or interested in joining the program, please reach out to me. You can find the information about Critical Issues Forum on our website, and please follow us on the social media, especially the Instagram, as we are actively posting educational information. Finally, CIF activities cannot be possible without generous support from our donors and friends. So I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to the funders and supporters of the CIF project, the Tom and Sarah Pattison Fund, the Saga Foundation, the Catherine Wasmer Davis Conflict Transformation Collaborative Fund, and Mr. Greg Warpert. Thank you so much for your continuing support. So now I'm happy to introduce our center's Deputy Director, Ms. Jessica Varnam, who is going to give a welcome remarks. So Jessica, now microphone is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Masako, and thank you for all the hard work that you put in to run this program every day and for special events like this. You're amazing, and I'm so glad that we have somebody who is as enthusiastic about youth education as you, who's actually running this initiative. So as Masako mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director of the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies, and I've also worked there for a little over 16 years now. So have been involved really heavily with our youth programs from the very beginning, because that's always been a particular area of passion for me. And a big reason for that is that it's easy for me, and I apologize for the teachers and others who have heard this before, but it's easy for me to understand the power of youth education and high school education, because I became interested in going into this field when I was in high school myself. And obviously at that point, I didn't know what was actually going to end up happening. But for me, this threat has always been very real. And I think one of the things that this really engaging interactive presentation about the situation in Hawaii, and then unfortunately all the awful things happening in the news with Russia and Ukraine, have brought to people's minds at a much wider level than previous years, the last 20 years, let's say, is that this, unfortunately, the threat of a nuclear attack of some kind, the threat of inadvertent attacks even, is just as serious, if not more so, as it was during the Cold War. And I think for a long time, many in the public, and frankly, many in policy, did not take this threat seriously enough, what with the fact of having thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons that are still in countries' arsenals around the world. And so I think that the power of programs like this, and the fact that you're here participating today, and we have other schools that have participated in CIF, is that youth are particularly well positioned to take seriously things that a lot of older people frankly don't anymore and think are trapped in the Cold War. And I think part of that is, at least for me personally, when I was growing up in northern Maine, I lived about 20 minutes from a base that was a significant base of operations, military base during the Cold War. And I remember as a kid seeing the movie War Games, which came out in the 80s. And the very first target that the then Soviet Union would have hit with nuclear weapons was basically right near where I grew up. And it made a lot of sense out of things like a lot of houses I'd play in as a kid, including my grandmother's, had bomb shelters in the basement. Obviously, they wouldn't have done much good in the event of a nuclear war, but people were building them into their houses back then because of the real threat. And I remember hearing stories like asking my mother why it was that my sister and I both had passports from when we were a baby, even though we never traveled outside of the United States. And the reason was that my parents themselves had memories of being little kids and being packed into the car and taken across the Canadian border for an extensive visit during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because they thought that we were about to get hit and they wanted to take the kids as far away as possible from that. And so this has never been a threat that to me has not seemed real. But what I realized as I grew up was this a threat a lot of people don't feel is real, or that has not felt real to them, at least since the end of the Cold War. And so I think that the fact that you're all here today suggests that you understand that this is a real threat. And I think more and more people, unfortunately, with what's going on in the world, are beginning to realize that again. But then the next step is not just realizing it's important and wanting to be part of the solution. It's also thinking about how you can be part of that solution. And I think everyday people can be part of that solution through efforts like public education, where this becomes an issue in political debates and in voting decisions. But I also think that there's an immense opportunity for youth to seriously consider ways that their future career, which could be not directly related to nonproliferation, you might work for a tech sector company someday, but ways that their future career can contribute to solving big global problems like nuclear nonproliferation and disarmament. And so I'm going to tell you a couple examples that I think go really well with today's presentation. And thank you to all of our wonderful guests who are here today to share this interactive. I was particularly impressed and thrilled with On the Morning You Wake, because we've attempted at CNS to do smaller scale VR efforts and things like that to spread public education around these issues, because There's a lot of people who don't have a particular interest in nuclear threats, but they might very well look at our Minecraft game that we created about the US and Russian bunkers that still exist and have billions of dollars invested into them because leaders like Putin want someplace to go if there's a nuclear attack. And being able to communicate that to a really diverse audience requires using innovative technologies and tools. And so that's where virtual reality and things like that are really important. And what On the Morning You Wake does that we've always struggled to do is it had the level of professional investment in it where it could really be compelling to audiences that are used to seeing these, movie quality effects. And so I'm really impressed with this product, and I think it is enormously important in reaching audiences that otherwise might not be all that interested. So to me, technology has a couple functions in our field. One is just getting the message across to as wide an audience as possible that this is an issue that should matter for your voting. This is an issue that should matter for various decisions you're making on a day-to-day basis, even if you don't work in this field or in policy. But two is, and this is something we do a lot of at CNS as well, technology can then be part of the solution. And so we have a team of people at CNS that's frequently featured in the news for finding things using satellite imagery analysis, for figuring out answers to problems using other forms of technology through the corporate partnerships that we have with companies in Silicon Valley. And an example of this that I like to share, and there's a million I could share with you if this was a longer conversation, is, well, maybe not literally a million, but a lot. I like to share the example that during the Obama administration, when the United States was negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran, there was actually a report that came out in the news that claimed that Iran had another underground uranium enrichment facility that it was attempting to hide from the United States and the West. And that therefore, because Iran was acting in good faith by having this clandestine facility, we ought to stop negotiating on the Iran nuclear deal. And our team at CNS, along with others at other organizations, went straight to work immediately, because what we said to ourselves was, we were around when the Iraq war happened in 2003 on the basis of weapons of mass destruction that turned out not to exist. But at that point in time, things like satellite imagery hadn't gotten very far. And so we couldn't actually be an independent source outside of government to say, actually, these claims that are being made and these images that are coming out are not good, right? They're not good intelligence. But when the deal was being worked on under the Obama administration and somebody claimed that there was this centrifuge facility in Iran, we had those technologies at our fingertips because we had looked at that situation in 2003 and said, what do we have to do to get to a point where we can provide the kind of external check on this sort of thing that we ought to be able to do? And so we were able to use a whole bunch of different tools, satellite imagery analysis, Google traffic, all kinds of things to demonstrate using technology that this was in fact a passport and ID production facility, meaning they made secure identification cards there, right? Nothing to do with nuclear programs, nothing that is disallowed, and nothing that would be in contradiction to the spirit of the Iran nuclear deal. And so because that was handled within the first day or two after the allegation came out, then we were able to put it out there that this was not a problem. And people who were supportive of the deal were able to continue to support it publicly and move forward with it. I mention all of this because this gets back to the point about youth and about you. A lot of these innovative things we're doing with technology, satellite imagery analysis, 3D modeling, virtual reality, have been led by and brainstormed by our students, whether it's our college students that we come for our undergraduate summer program, whether it's our graduate students who are there working with us throughout the year. We found that it is very often youth that come up with the cleverest next generation technology solutions to problems that we're facing when it comes to nuclear threats. And you too, if you choose to do so, can help us to come up with the next set of solutions. And so we often have the case that, I have undergraduate students that come for the summer and they say, I'm here to learn from you. And I say, I'm here to learn from you as much as you're here to learn from me, because you've learned things and have ideas for things that aren't going to occur to me or to any of my other staff who've been doing this for a really long time. And so we hope that you take from this program and from all the other experiences you participate in with CIF, the lesson that you too can make a positive difference in the world. And you can do it starting right now. It doesn't have to wait till 10 years or 15 years down the road when you're more established in whatever careers you choose. So thank you for caring about these critical issues, quite literally critical issues for the Critical Issues Forum. And I am sorry that I have to actually, unfortunately, leave for another commitment to not be able to stay for the rest of the presentation, but thank you to our speakers as well for coming today to share this set of important lessons with our youth as well.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was really inspiring. So now I would like to play a trailer of this movie, the documentary film, "On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World." Just a 2 minutes trailer.
On the morning you wake to the end of the world, take your body back to the kai, to the place our kupuna taught us life began. First pole, then coral, then slime, then a whole universe fitting into a space smaller than a grain of sand.
911, please, fire ambulance.
I just got an alert on my phone saying there was a ballistic missile inbound.
Yeah, we just got it too. As much as you know, that's how much we know.
Pacific Command has detected a missile threat to Hawaii. A missile may impact on land or sea within minutes. This is not a drill. If you are indoors, stay indoors. If you are outdoors, seek immediate shelter in a building. Remain indoors while away from windows.
On the morning you wake to the end of the world, your vision will be 2020. So use it. And maybe, just maybe, the world may not have to end again tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Galina. I'm sure that everybody started fearing that we would like to watch movie. Yeah. So next, I'd like to introduce Michaela Ternasky-Holland. Michaela is an award-winning XR metaverse storyteller. She's currently with the Games for Changes to promote this film to enhance social impact as a creative strategist and impact producer. She sent us a video message, so let's watch her video.
Hi, my name is Michaela Ternasky-Holland, and I am the impact producer for On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World. It is our pleasure to be collaborating with Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey. On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World is a project that was started with Games for Change and Princeton University when they were asking themselves, how can we make the threat of nuclear weapons not just an issue for today's audience, but also more human. After the Hawai'i events that happened in January of 2018, the team decided to focus their VR experience on this specific event. One of our really close researchers at Princeton University, who is working under the Science and Global Security Program, Tamara Lilinoe Patton, is actually a native Hawaiian and had a lot of interesting perspectives around this event that happened. She was sitting at the Princeton University Library when Hawaii received the false ballistic missile alert and was suddenly flooded with text messages. This was the inspiration for On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World, having that more human approach. We have been incredibly honored to showcase On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World in so many different places all over the world, from the Vienna Nuclear Ban Forum with ICANN, to the United Nations in New York, to the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons first meeting of state parties in Vienna. We've also showcased this piece in New Zealand. We've showcased this piece in Melbourne, Australia. We've also showcased this piece in Hawaii and New York. And now we are pleased to be able to be a part of this speaker series on critical issues. It is an honor working as the impact producer for On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World, because my job is not just to make sure that the project itself is making impact, but making sure that we're creating a constellation of organizations, activists, and people working wholeheartedly in policy to disarm nuclear weapons around the world. Because of this mindset around constellation, organization building, and of course, activists, we have been able to bring in impact fellows who advise us not just on the overall project and where we should showcase it, but also on the wraparound materials of the project, where we do onboarding surveys, aftercare surveys. They've also advised us on the curriculum, the education, the way that we present, the way that we talk about nuclear weapons threat. And one of these incredible impact fellows is Cynthia Lazaroff, who you will hear from in just a few minutes. I can't do this work alone. Impact production is very, very, very busy, and it tends to have a lot of moving pieces, from building education curriculum, to managing client partners, to managing organizations, to even helping people learn about virtual reality for the first time. And that is why it is my pleasure to also be able to share that my colleague and XR production manager, Erinn will be joining Cynthia Lazaroff. None of the work that we've been doing with On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World would be possible without my colleague, Erinn. And I'm so excited for you all to hear them speak today with their moderator, Faranik. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your speaker series, and I hope that you all are inspired by this VR documentary to go out into the world and make a small change, or be inspired by the fact that you've been working out there to make a change, and now there's a documentary that uses the medium of virtual reality to continue and push your work forward. Thank you so much for being a part of our nuclear disarmament community. Thank you so much for having Games for Change and On the Morning You Wake to the End of the World, and have a wonderful rest of your event.
Great. Thank you. I'm just so excited to have this amazing partnership. So now we would like to hear from our speakers today. We are so excited to have amazing two guest speakers. First speaker is Cynthia Lazaroff. Cynthia is the founder of Women Transforming Our Nuclear Legacy and the Nuclear Wake-Up Call Earth. She is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, U.S.-Russia relations expert, and author of Dawn of a New Armageddon, a personal account of the Hawai'i missile alert amidst escalating nuclear dangers. Cynthia is dedicated to working for the abolition of nuclear weapons and has founded groundbreaking U.S.-Russia exchange initiatives since the early 1980s. Today, she will share with us her experience on that morning and how it has impacted to her further efforts for nuclear disarmament and more. So Cynthia, stage is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Masako. I'm so honored to be here with you and all of you present today. It really warms my heart to be with all of you who care so much about disarmament and our future. So just a little context for what was going on in my life on that morning in January 2018. When the Cold War came to an end, I thought I could stop worrying about nuclear war. But all of this changed for me in 2017 when I was working on a film and I interviewed dozens of the world's top experts in the US and Russia on nuclear dangers. Pretty much everyone awakened me to the escalating post-Cold War nuclear danger. The two who had the greatest impact on me were former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, who recently passed away, and US former Secretary of Defense William Perry. Secretary Perry said to me, and remember this is 2017, 5 years ago, today we're at a greater risk of some sort of a nuclear catastrophe than we were during the Cold War, and most people are blissfully unaware of this danger. And then he said to me, we're sleepwalking into another catastrophe and we must wake up. For me, that was a devastating revelation because I realized that I'd been sleepwalking since the end of the Cold War. I came home from those interviews to Hawaii at the height of the fire and fury between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And nuclear tensions were particularly high in Hawaii because we knew that we had been marked as a target on Pyongyang's map of nuclear death. So we were actually getting instructions from our local government about how to prepare for a nuclear attack and how to survive a nuclear attack. So all of this was present for me in my awareness on that morning of January 13th, 2018, when I was one of over 1 million people across the Hawaiian Islands who all got the message on our cell phones: ballistic missile threat, inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter, this is not a drill. And at first, it was kind of this feeling of, can this be real? And so we started to try to get through to 911. We were dialing it over and over again, but we couldn't get through because everybody was trying to call 911 at the same time. So my partner said to me, I don't know if this is real or not, but I'm going to go get the girls. Our younger daughters were 7 miles away in the town of Kapa'a. So he rushed to go out the door, and I said, wait a second. We need a plan. If it is real, I don't want to be separated. And he said, call me in the car and we'll figure it out. So I stood there dazed, and I thought, who do I know that's going to know? And I immediately thought of my dear friend, Felicia Cowden, who's a journalist. And she's the first to know anything about anything on the island, and everybody takes her phone calls. So I thought, she's going to know. So I tried to call her. I left a message. I texted her. I checked her Facebook page. Nothing. And after what seemed like an eternity, she called me back. And she said, Cynthia, the county is telling us to take shelter. And so I thought, my God, this is real. I have to take this seriously. So the first question was, where do we go? There are no designated nuclear shelters in the state of Hawaii. So we decided to shelter at a neighbor's place. He has a meditation cave in a hillside, and that was the most sealed environment that we thought we could spend that time in. And then it was, well, what do I take with me? And I looked down at my phone, and it had 12% charge. And I thought, what am I going to do? And so I grabbed a woven bag, and I started throwing things in it. I threw my phone charger, my computer charger, my passport, my purse. And then I grabbed a shawl to wrap around my face in case of radiation, and then leggings for the same reason. And then I thought, food and water. I've done nothing to prepare my family for this. We had been instructed to stock 1 gallon of water per day per person for 14 days, and enough canned food for everyone for 14 days. And I just thought, I've done nothing to prepare my family for this. And I looked on the shelf, and there were 2 bottles of water, and I threw them in the bag. And then I grabbed a bunch of bananas, and then I ran out the door. And I jumped in the car, because even though the neighbors close by, we didn't know how many minutes we had. And so I started towards the cave, and it was only at that moment that I allowed myself to think of my elder daughter in Los Angeles, who had just left a few days ago. And honestly, if I'd thought of her a minute before, I probably wouldn't have been able to organize myself to leave. But I knew that I had to try to connect with her to say goodbye. So I started to try to call her, and it was ringing and ringing, and she wasn't picking up. And so I parked the car, and I started running towards the cave. And just as I got to the foot of the steps to the cave, she picked up. And I said, Mackenzie, I don't know if you've heard, but we've all gotten this message on our cell phones that we're going to be hit by a nuclear missile. And I just want you to know I love you. I'm going to try to call you again from the cave if I can, but I really just want you to know I love you. And she said, Mom, I love you too. At that moment, time stopped for me. This was the moment when it all became the most real for me. I didn't want to let her go. I didn't know if I'd ever hear her voice again. And I thought, what if this isn't one nuclear missile, but what if this is many nuclear missiles from Russia coming to us and many from us going back to them? What if this is the beginning of one of those accidental nuclear wars that Secretary Perry and Gorbachev and so many of the experts that I interviewed are so concerned about? What if this is the beginning of the end of life as we know it, of everything and everyone we know and love and cherish on this earth? And then I heard, Mom, go, go. Mackenzie jolted me out of this, and I said, I love you. And I ran up the hill to the cave. And just as I got to the door of the cave, it opened. And it was my neighbor, Colleen. And she walked out, and she was smiling. And she said, it was a false alarm. It took our government 38 minutes to send out a message that it was a false alarm. And even with everything that I knew about nuclear weapons and nuclear war, nuclear war was unimaginable to me until I went through these 38 minutes. Now this experience is still with me. It lives inside of me as a mother, as a human being, and it's never going to go away until we eliminate nuclear weapons. The first feeling that I had when I heard that it was a false alarm was this feeling of, my God, I'm still here. I was pinching my cheeks. I felt we're all still here. It's not too late. We still have time to get this right. We still have time to do something about this. And then I had this feeling of, this is a wake-up call, and it's also a gift, because it was as though my life had been returned to me. It was as though I had it back again, and that we still had time. And so then the next feeling was, you need to share this. So I started writing that day. And I really had this feeling I wanted everyone to know what this was like, so that we could come together to change our nuclear story, that we could come together to eliminate nuclear weapons. And so I finished this writing over 8 months, and I published an article in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists on Hiroshima Day in 2018. And it was at that point that the filmmakers for On the Morning You Wake reached out to me. They read the article and said, would you be interviewed for the project? And for me, it was like On the Morning You Wake has been an answer to a prayer for me, because it's such a powerful way to share this story with so many people. And it really also ends in a call to action. There's a character that says we must act. So it's not just about awakening, although awakening is a first step, it's awakening to action. And it really ends on this message that we all have agency. We all can make a difference, that we all have a role to play, and that we all can work together to support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And you all heard my amazing colleague, Michaela, say, I can't do this work alone. And I say to all of you, I can't do this work alone either. None of us can. This work belongs to all of us. If nuclear weapons can destroy all of us, we all have a stake and a role to play in eliminating them. So my dear friend, former Ambassador Elaine White Gomez of Costa Rica, who's also an alumna of Middlebury Institute of International Studies, she presided over the negotiations at the United Nations for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And she says that history is made by every single step that we take every day. So she invites us to join her and people all over the world in making history by supporting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I know so many of you are already doing this work, so I thank you for all you're doing. We can do this all together. And for me, the treaty is the greatest ray of light and hope in this work. So I echo Elaine and I say, join us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Cynthia. It's so poignant, but so inspiring, all of us to take some action. Thank you so much. So now I'm thrilled to have Erinn Budd as our next speaker. Erinn is a multi-hyphenate, creative and experiential producer. Her work meets at the cross-section of impact, technology, and immersive storytelling. Recently, she has worked alongside brands such as Adidas, Spotify, and Katy Perry's Las Vegas residency play. She currently serves as an impact producer for On the Morning You Wake with Michaela. So Erinn will talk about the impact of virtual reality and storytelling on social justice, particularly how this film has impacted on disarmament movement. So Erinn, the microphone is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much. And I know my background is vastly different than what you probably expect someone working on this project to do, but that kind of goes as a testament of being a social impact producer and someone that is actually moving the needle and not necessarily having roots within nuclear disarmament, but someone that is using this as a point of activism, a part of us moving the needle forward and creating social change. So just to kind of backtrack On the Morning You Wake is a 3-part documentary film that's going to be within VR headset, which is a Quest 2 headset. And it has 3 chapters. All 3 have been produced and premiered this year. Chapter 1 goes into testimony and interviews from people that were either on the island or native to the island that day. Chapter 2 has a very, very impactful, and it's probably my favorite chapter out of the 3, testimony of a Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivor. And then chapter 3 goes into what can we do? What are our actions? What can we do to kind of make this a situation that doesn't happen in the future? And as an impact producer, my job is to not only bring it to places and spaces just like this, whether it's physically or digitally, it's also equally important for us to find a middle ground, find a place where people can have that kind of compassion point. And I know we're saying nuclear disarmament, we're saying these big words that are not necessarily native to a lot of people. So our job is to drive it home. And at the core, On the Morning You Wake is about home and what home feels like to you. So we create these wraparound materials that are part of your onboarding and your aftercare. And we do these in surveys, as well as, setting the soundscape, the color design, everything that you would kind of see around the experience. And what we do is we recenter your focus. Sometimes when you talk about nuclear disarmament or you talk about nuclear weapons, you get 2 very vast different reactions. You get, oh, this is only something that happened during the Cold War. And some people say, oh, this reminds me of what's going on in certain places like North Korea or Russia and Ukraine. But it always feels a little distant to a lot of people that are specifically within the US, because it's not something that, at least within my generation, we have had any direct conflict with. So what we do is say, okay, great, let's take it a step back. What's something that everyone can relate to? And that's home. And that's, at the end of the day, what we want people to focus on. We could have went doom and gloom. We could have went big mushroom clouds, but then at some point you have almost an adverse reaction to that, because that's something that we've seen time and time again. What is a different approach to the same story, but how do we kind of convey the human side of it? So again, as an impact producer, it is my job to tell stories like Tamara's or Cynthia's, and make it so that these people don't feel like they're just people in a project, but these are actual humans. And in doing so, in our onboarding survey, we even set you up to understand what you're about to consume. Okay, do you know what this is about? What is your familiarity with nuclear weapons? It could be 0, it could be 10. We're not judging you either way, because I can say from the beginning of this project, when I came on, which was about a year ago, I didn't know a lot. And I've learned so much from people like Cynthia, like Ray, like Lovely, like everyone here, even Michaela and I. We have done our own due diligence and research. It's like, okay, we were walking blind, as people would say, and how can we change that? And our medium is through this VR documentary. And it was important to us and the filmmakers to use VR as a medium instead of your standard 2D version, because 1, not only is it emerging technology, but it's a different way to kind of consume and educate yourself about a serious problem that we have. And with VR, a lot of people may think that this is inaccessible, that this is something that only people with a certain amount of money or financial capital can screen or can view. But again, as a social impact producer, it is my job and Michaela's job to take this on the road. So we have been to Melbourne, Australia. We've been to Vienna. We've been to Texas. We've been to Hawaii. We've been everywhere that we can to screen the project. And no audience is too big or too small for us, because you all are going to be agents of change. I'm just the person that's kind of helping drive the car and get it there. And what you all do to create systems of change is just a part of our entire ecosystem, which is part of our wraparound materials. So after you do your onboarding survey, we get you into headset, and we traditionally let people kind of choose their own journey. Again, the entire piece is 3 chapters long. Runtime is about 38 minutes, which is very similar to the amount of time that they experienced. And some people don't have 38 minutes to kind of sit and watch the entire project. So what I do is I say, okay, great. Can I have 5 minutes of your time? Can I have 10 minutes of your time? Can I have just one chapter? And in watching that one chapter, a lot of people either come back or they'll just sit there and watch the rest of it because you're so captivated by the story. And again, centering the human aspect of it, it kind of changes your perspective. You think going into the documentary, it's going to be a lot of facts thrown at you. It's going to be something that just feels a little stale and not welcoming. But On the Morning You Wake and the filmmakers have done a really, really great job in creating an atmosphere that feels so close to home. It's almost shaking to me sometimes. And I've watched this plenty of times, and each time I have a different reaction to it because in my traveling, I take different stories with me. And that even changes how Michaela and I approach certain questions within our aftercare survey. We've had people cry, we've had people be mad, we've had people run out of the room, we've had people just sit there and sit in their own silence. So what we do is in that aftercare survey, we kind of help decompress what you've watched. It's a lot. It's very taxing, especially emotionally, because with VR, although you may be watching it in a room full of people also in headset, it's a very intimate kind of screening. It's just you have the headset on, you're sitting in a chair, but you're in a room full of people, but you're siloed. So how can we make your entry back into the real world, quote unquote, the most comfortable? So we do that again with the unpacking of the aftercare survey. And we ask you questions like, if you had 38 minutes to make your world a better place, what would you do? And we've used this kind of question in activations from Oslo, Norway at the Nobel Peace Center, all the way out into Times Square in New York, where we had a beautiful art exhibition where people were actually able to text us their responses. And we had that on our community page. And as that continues to live and breathe in the world, we check in and see what someone's responses is. Some people like, I would just go and find my family, or someone said I would plant a tree, or someone said I would call my parliament. There are so many different options, and I want it to be very clear that no answer is a wrong answer. As long as you are continuing to move the needle forward, you are doing your job. And I just find it refreshing that so many people, after seeing the project, even if it's just chapter 1, feel a little bit of glimpse of hope. And it's unfortunate that this situation had to happen to so many people in order for us to open up our eyes to this situation. But I find a little bit of solace in knowing that in telling this story, we can prevent this from happening in the future. And I can even educate and help push the needle forward, whether that be within the United Nations, which has been an amazing opportunity for us to go to, but also high school students. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to be here forever. And the next generation behind me is going to be the one that's kind of carrying that flag. And technology is only going to continue to evolve. So if this is the storytelling that we're doing now around nuclear disarmament, I can only imagine what you all do in the future to carry that flag. We've been able to create amazing curriculum surrounding the project. So we typically only screen it to high school and university level students. We don't go any younger than that just because of the subject matter, but there's a connective point to every single thing that you do. So within going back to the aftercare survey, depending on what your interests are, we match you with an organization that is going to be localized to your environment. So if you're in Australia, we're going to partner you possibly with ICANN Australia. Or if you are into the arts, we're going to partner you with specific organizations surrounded by nuclear disarmament within the art space. If you are a person that loves policy and wants to move it forward doing policy, we're going to connect you with that. It's a matter of finding people where they are. And I think a lot of the times with big topics and sensitive subject matter, no one wants to meet someone where they are. And that's never the case with the impact producer. It is our job to say, okay, great. If you are in this locale and this means something to you, or if you are an aspiring journalist, this is how you can move the needle forward within your specific subject matter and area of expertise. I will be the first to tell you, I'm not an expert on nuclear weapons whatsoever. I do have a lot more education about it, but what I can do is I'm a dot connector. I'm a storyteller and a dot connector, and I can connect you with the right people at the right time, at the right place, to continue in telling this story and unpacking this, and then hopefully getting to a place where this is no longer a topic of conversation, but something that's more in the history and in our past. You know, unfortunately, that's not happening right now. We still have a lot of work to do, but I am grateful to be surrounded by people like you all to continue to tell the story. And, you know, I know we are gonna run some questions pretty soon, but I would love it if there's anyone out there that has any additional questions about the project, or if you want to see or screen On the Morning You Wake, we can kind of continue the conversation, because again, it does not stop here. This is just a catalyst. This is a jumping point to what we need to do in the future. And VR is just a lovely medium to kind of put it in, instead of having it in your traditional 2D form. We consume a lot of media every day, whether that be on our cell phones, whether that be on our computers, whether that be on our iPads, and being able to be completely immersed in a completely new environment is breathtaking. And it can definitely change the minds of even the toughest people that I've seen. And I'm going to stop here, but again, I'm forever grateful and forever indebted for everyone that I've run into over the past few months, making me a much better social activist in my world, but also telling this amazing story. And I just want to thank everybody for their time.
Thank you so much, Erinn. I just couldn't contain my excitement for the prospect to what we could do together, especially for youth education. So I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. So now we are moving to the panel discussion. I'm happy to introduce my colleague at the CNS, Dr. Ferenc Ternasky-Holland, scientist in residence. After a rewarding career as an experimental physicist, he switched fields to physics in the public service. He became a professional specialist at the Princeton program on science and global security. At the Middlebury Institute, he is teaching a course on the science and technology on nonproliferation and terrorism studies, and has taught a course on nuclear treaty verification using virtual reality. He's also very passionate about nuclear justice and environmental justice. So Ferenc is going to moderate the discussion. So Ferenc, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Masako. So thanks for having me. I'm so honored and happy to moderate this discussion. As all of you, I'm very interested in storytelling and considering how VR, AR, gamification, simulations can be used for the greater good. I should correct Masako just a little bit. It's not really a VR experience. It was actually a more like Second Life. Do you remember the old Second Life? But it was very powerful. And the reason for that is because the students were kind of divided into groups where they were trying to verify a nuclear treaty that, or a nuclear verification inspection to bring us to of actual nuclear weapons, to bring us to zero. And so it was really great because they worked together. They made a protocol. It was all based on what's called the UK&I experiment, which was between UK and Norway, where they tried to work together to come up with a protocol to actually verify that a nuclear weapon is a nuclear weapon. So it was a really, really exciting experience, and I hope to do it in the future again. I'd like to first ask the question to Cynthia, if that's okay. I think you answered, I had a whole bunch of questions prepared, but I think you answered a lot of them. And what I wanted to really ask you, and I think it's most relevant for all the young people who are here, with your expertise and perspective that you gained through the Hawaiian missile false alarm scare, and your experience as a citizen diplomat and working on issues of nuclear weapons for so long, how do we operationalize the hope into action, which is in the movie? Hope is a large part of the movie. It was so eloquently expressed in the poem by Dr. Jamaica Hioli Osario, which I found so powerful. So what concrete steps do you suggest that young people could take to use this hope as a superpower to supercharge you to work towards changing the status quo? And I guess it's for both of you, I guess. Maybe Cynthia first.
Well, thank you, Ferenc. That's a wonderful question, and it really is the heart of the matter for this work. So I'm really glad that you asked it. And I think that one of the things that coming back to Ambassador White, every single step we take every day can make a difference. No act is insignificant. And there are things that actually we can all start doing today, and we all have a voice. So, Ambassador White also says, think about the world you inhabit, the people you touch every day, in your family, at your school, in your community, at your place of worship, if you have a place of worship. All of those people, think of, you can start a conversation. You can start a conversation about this experience in this event today, something you learned. You can ask what people know about the nuclear threat. You can just begin to plant those seeds. So that's something that you can start to do right now, and it doesn't have to wait. You can also do that with your elected representatives. I think it's really important at this time that we reach out and we say, what do you know about the nuclear threat? What are you doing to protect us? Will you support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons? And this gets into what you can do for the treaty. And there are a number of very specific campaigns, concrete steps that we can take. One is getting your elected representative to sign what's called the parliamentary pledge. So that's basically supporting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And we need so many more in the United States to do that. We need so many around the world to do it. So that's one thing that people can do. The other is to get your city to sign the city's appeal, to sign on to that. And this is, again, reaching out to your elected representatives, but really starting a conversation about, cities are one of the main targets of nuclear weapons. So really making it, Erinn spoke so beautifully about, this is about bringing it home. This is about bringing it home to the place that we live, These are the stakes for all of us. It's personal. It's not something way out there. That's what this film does. It really does bring it home. It brings it into our hearts. It's not something just for the experts or the policymakers. Again, it comes back to, we all have a stake. Our lives are at stake. So it's really having those very personal conversations, finding those connection points with people. The other area, there's also just getting your country on board, and getting the parliamentarians and getting your cities all play into getting your country to support the treaty. So right now, there are 68 countries that have ratified the treaty, 91 countries, I believe, that have signed the treaty. 122 countries adopted the treaty at the UN in 2017. It's now entered into force in 68 countries. It entered into force last year. Nuclear weapons are banned in those countries, and also the threat of the use of them, the production, manufacturing, development. So again, there's so many things that we can do, but those are some of the concrete steps. And you can connect with other people in organizations doing this work, which Erinn, again, the work that Erinn and Michaela do in the follow-up, the aftercare program, the careful way that they connect people and support people wherever they are when they come out of that experience. I've witnessed it. It's absolutely, as breathtaking as the piece is, their work is breathtaking. So it's really, I really recommend the use of this film wherever possible, because it brings it home and inspires people to say, what can I do? And then they're right there to say, this is what you can do.
Yeah, I think that's really, really true. Very powerful, the aftercare kind of survey that you do. I think that's really so important. Is there something that you would like to say, Erinn, to chime in on this discussion?
I think just to circle back, one, I could not do this without Cynthia. I know I send her so many messages, so I could not do this without her. But I think, again, as an impact producer, it is my job to continue in the storytelling aspect of it, and to hear that what we're doing and how we're portraying the project outside of the headset is as equally as important, really just tugs on the heartstrings a little bit. And I know Michaela and I are very proud of the work that we have done, but this is only the beginning. We're not stopping. So how can we find people in different corners of the world and inspire change through a VR headset? And if that means I have to throw my VR headset in my backpack and kind of trudge around the world, which we've basically done all summer, we'll definitely do that. But I do want to drive home the fact that no audience is too big or too small for us to screen this. So we've done this with classroom groups up to 30 people at a time, and we've done it down to 2 people at a time. It really is a matter of understanding where we are in the world right now and how this film, because it is a film, can really be an agent of change the same way films in the past have done that. Like, media has always been a driving force because it's a piece of art. And as long as we consider to revamp and understand and break down how art can be still a catalyst of change, but just in a different medium, I think that the next generation will be far better off than we are, instead of using it just for social media and likes and clicks sometimes.
Great, thank you. So just to let everybody know, please use the chat box for questions. I'm going to read the questions out loud. Or better yet, actually unmute your mic and ask the questions personally, but not quite yet. I want to ask one more question, if that's okay. And this is to both of you, which is, last week, I looked at a news program. I'm going to withhold the program, what it is. And the host was a host and a politician and academic were discussing the need for nuclear weapons. And they all, without any deep analysis, concluded that we'll never get rid of nuclear weapons, period. So this is a question really to both of you. So how can we get people to visualize, just like this documentary did, what a world would look like without nuclear weapons? So I used the power of games, etc., visualize a future of us without nuclear weapon. I think this could potentially be a sequel. I think we've all lived under this threat for so long that there's no urgency really to visualize that world. But for people to believe they really need to see what that world would look like. And my guess is that world is not so different than the world we're in today, but it doesn't have the threat of nuclear obliteration due to anger or a mistake or just bad luck.
Cynthia, did you want to take this one first?
Sure. Well, you know, this question really speaks to my heart. And also it's a question people often ask, how can we ever get rid of these weapons? You know, it's never going to happen. And I want to just offer a few things. One is that, you know, when I first heard about the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons in the nuclear security field, people would roll their eyes and say, oh, that's a beautiful idea. It's never going to happen. And then it was adopted by 122 countries at the United Nations. And then then in the security field, it's never going to be ratified. It's never going to enter force. And it had the 50th ratification in fall 2020 and entered into force in January of 2021. So, you know, so that's something that people said was going to be impossible. Just like I grew up, people said the Cold War was never going to end. The Berlin Wall was never going to come down. Apartheid was never going to end. And I want to quote Nelson Mandela, who says it always seems impossible until it's done. But also my indigenous elder kumus, my teachers in Hawaii, they say you need, in terms of visualizing, that you need to go to the place where it's already done. And one of them said to me, go to a beach 300 years in the future where your great-great-great-great-grandchildren are thanking you for this work, and visualize a world where instead of the money being spent on weapons and destruction and pollution, and that it's clean water, it's an ocean with thriving coral reefs and thriving life, and it's clean air, and it's, you know, people have health care and they have education, and there's enough money for all the things that we need in one, and climate is resilient. You know, we're able to transfer the incredible wasted trillions of dollars on militarism and billions of dollars on nuclear weapons, and we're able to repurpose that. So we have to have the capacity to see it and to go to that place, even when it seems impossible. That's what Nelson Mandela did. That's what so many people have done who have led the way. And they show us that the impossible, we can make the impossible possible. Change can happen sometimes very quickly. The day that the Berlin Wall came down, the CIA didn't even predict it. Nobody saw it coming that day. And it happened like that, and it was bloodless. So I don't know, but that's what comes to mind when you ask the question.
Great, thank you.
I think to piggyback on what Cynthia just said, we are closer to it than we think. And I think a lot of people are like, oh no, every single country has it. And that is not the case. There are about 13,000 nuclear weapons, probably hopefully a little less than that, but only 9 countries have that. So there's already people that are, majority of the world is navigating it without having these arms. And to understand that 9 countries can literally hold the world hostage because they have these nuclear weapons it's scary, to say the absolute least. And it's disheartening because there was a time whenever we didn't have these devices. And I say to the people that say, oh, this would never happen and we're just going to have to kind of live with it, there are implications outside of them even being detonated. There are implications in creating these things. There are implications in harvesting these. There are implications across the board that you may not see or feel in your direct path, but there are still, housing places and apartment buildings in New York, in Texas, in Arkansas, and all these different places that still have active like radiation in the grounds, and people walk by that, or they go to school near it, or they live near it and have absolutely no idea, and is causing all types of illnesses, whether it be cancer or things like that. So this is not a problem that is just the bomb is detonated. That's not what this is. It's about all the additional steps in between there. And I do believe it's feasible. It's just a matter of everyone coming to the table and saying, hey, we all are going to walk away from this table with our loaded gun and, get rid of it. Because essentially, whenever these 9 countries go to a lot of these conversations, they're walking up to the table already armed with countries that don't necessarily have that, or even believe that should even happen or exist. So to those people, I say we are a lot closer to it than you actually think. And, difficult takes a few days, but impossible takes a week. And I rather reach for impossible than difficult on any day.
That's a really good point. I guess at this time, I'm going to open it up to the audience. So I'm just going to read some questions, if that's okay. So the first question is from Jaden Rodriguez. So this question is for Erinn. Do you and your team plan to make more VR, and or AR projects to address more worldwide issues in the future?
Absolutely. So at Games for Change, we have an entire part of our company called XR for Change, which solely focuses on mixed reality, whether that be VR, AR, any sort of mixed reality kind of medium, and using it for social change. So On the Morning You Wake is just one project that I have the amazing opportunity to work on. There's 2 other projects that we're currently working on, one called Goliath, Playing with Reality. And that one is specifically surrounding mental health. In the first chapter that is already out, also on the Oculus, is going to be around schizophrenia and how we can use that as a catalyst to educate people, because what a lot of people don't know is that the symptoms for schizophrenia typically show up around your undergrad kind of age. So what some people may diagnose as someone acting out or may not be doing well in school, it could be underlying schizophrenia sort of like symptoms, and most people don't know it. So again, we're using that as a catalyst. Another project that we're also working on is something called The Choice, which is about women's rights and abortion rights. And I know that is a sensitive topic, specifically within the United States right now, but also how we can tell someone's story and say, okay, I would never want this to happen to my loved one. This is how we can kind of move the needle forward in the future. And we do some very similar things in creating partnerships and having a lot of people that we work with, whether that be with Goliath, On the Morning You Wake, or The Choice, that are experts in the area, that we can say, okay, great, these are experts. They can help provide us with additional education to create these wraparound materials, but also point us in the direction of people that need to be educated, whether that be policymakers, whether that be like the team over at Planned Parenthood for The Choice, whether that be the Mental Health Coalition with Goliath, and then whether it be people like you all On the Morning You Wake. So I have an amazing opportunity to be a master of none, but jack of all trades, and know a little bit about a lot, but I lean on my community and my fellows so much. And I've learned a lot within the last few months.
That's fantastic. And the other thing I wanted to mention actually about Games for Change is that you can download for free a lot of these experiences and games and all this stuff, which is really, really impressive. So all the students out there, you can just go to the website and look at what, what appeals to you. It's really, really, really cool, I have to say. So I want to ask a question from my great colleague, Galina Sonikova. The question is, it's actually a question I wanted to ask, so I'm sneaking two questions here. What response from policymakers to the movie do you see? And have you had a chance to show it to some representatives from the nuclear possessing states, especially policymakers?
So what I would say is that I haven't had the direct experience of witnessing the policymakers' reactions, but I know that we showed it at the United Nations. And I know that some policymakers, from my fellow colleague, Ray Atchison, they have talked about this, that the policymakers were every bit as moved who saw it at the UN as the students, as the filmmakers around the world, as the investment bankers. There was an investment banker in Vienna who said that he wanted to take it to fund managers in New York and talk about divestment. So what I've heard is that, although I haven't had the personal experience, is that they have really been moved by it and moved by the human story, that they can all relate to those human moments, where you're calling your loved one to, for example, to say goodbye for the last time. They can imagine that, or texting your friend for the last time, or racing to find shelter and not knowing where to go, which you see all of these things in the film. So I think it is helping them think twice about it. And we have the plans and goal to actually sit down with elected representatives and show it. I mean, that's a vision. And the leaders of the nuclear armed states, that's been a vision. The world events have kind of made that more difficult, much more difficult this year, just because of what's going on. But I hold that vision, seeing them actually watching it and being inspired to change. So
I would say I've had a great deal of contact with them more within the UN scope, which was very enlightening to me, because you never know anyone's reaction kind of going into headset or their reaction going out of it. And I think often we think of policymakers as people that are so distant from our honest truth and that they live a different life than we are, but they put their pants on the same way that we do. They wake up, they probably get their morning coffee the same way that we do. And at the end of the day, they just want to go home back to their families. And the project, circling back to it being about home and being about hope, I think is a different perspective than what they were expecting whenever they got in the headset. We could have, like I said, used big mushroom clouds and imagery that has been used repetitively within media, but what is that really going to do? We haven't seen much change from that. So in taking this different approach on the film, I think it connects with them on a deeper level. And I've had a few policymakers that specifically within Vienna at the treaty, they said, okay, all I have is 5 minutes. And I said, okay, great. Let me just get you started. And then I'll say, okay, I'll tap you on the shoulder after 5 minutes. And if you still want to run, I'll take you out of headset. And then it went from, oh, I have to run to, okay, I have a little bit more time to, okay, I'm going to just finish chapter 1. Yeah. And then as soon as they say I have a little bit more time, I'm like, I know we have them hooked. And we've even seen some of them come back day after day. Typically, whenever we do these multi-day installations or activations, they'll come back and watch a chapter a day because they want to finish it, because it's not about the doom and gloom, but more of the story behind it. And I think that is a way for us to kind of use like Inception as a way of changing people's perspectives. And I'm grateful that we were able to showcase it in these different spaces, because again, at the end of the day, we can write, we can do our part, but once it comes to those meetings behind closed doors, we don't necessarily always have access. And if this is something that they saw right before they walked into the door, I'm extremely proud of how they kind of came out and maybe have a slightly different perspective than when they walked in the door.
Great, thank you. I have actually just one more question. It's a short one and a fast one. I'm actually a huge fan of good old Google Cardboard, because obviously there's a huge price difference between Quest, Oculus, and so on. And so in the interest in as many people as possible to actually have the experience, is it possible to download the movie and view it on something like a simpler, like Google Cardboard, to experience the movie?
As of right now, we only have it available on the Oculus Quest 2, which I know is an accessibility issue. But again, we have shipped headsets across the globe to make sure that people can see this. We also have a 2D version that if we want to screen it to a much larger crowd, we can certainly do so. It's just the technology that's within the Oculus Quest 2 is going to be what gives you that amazing kind of illustration, that pixel work that you see. So it's like if we were to put it on your Google Cardboard, you wouldn't get the same cinematic experience. You would get the same storytelling, but you wouldn't get as much of the vibrance and the completely immersed work that the creators have kind of put together, unfortunately. So no, you can't, but if you want a headset, we can figure something out and get you a headset to screen it.
Right, okay. Yeah, it just wouldn't be the same type of experience, which I completely understand. And it's also what the artist had intended was to have, you know, the more complete experience. So I can completely understand that. So here's a question from Brianna Finley. I think it's the last question I see in the series. If other people want to add more questions, then, you know, write them in. Oh, there's maybe one more question, I hope, after this. But have you thought of creating projects that are not VR and AR? So this is for Erinn to speak up about nonproliferation or inspire others to speak up about it.
Yes. So we have gone back to the drawing board a few times and figured out how we can kind of tell this story in a different medium. And I can at least say specifically with On the Morning You Wake, we always thought that VR was the starting point, like the launching point. And there are different things that can kind of push us forward. So we have spoken about even doing a podcast and how we can kind of talk to people because podcasts are a lot more accessible. Most people have phones or computers that you can access the internet to and hear these amazing conversations. And we also are working on a museum exhibition. So that one would be something that could travel around the globe. And this way you can not only screen the project, but you can learn more about whether it be the making of the project or the history of nuclear weapons or the history of nuclear weapons even in media. There's so many different ways that we can kind of approach the project itself. But a big part of my job as an impact producer is, although a lot of this work is digital, how can I bring this physically to you? And the museum activations we're hoping to get off at the beginning of next year, which we're really excited about. And hopefully we can have a few people kind of come in and screen it while it is up and traveling and touring. But we have looked at different options. It's a very sticky situation still with the pandemic and, you know, traveling and COVID and things like that. But we are doing our best to see how we can continue to tell the story in different mediums, although VR and AR was its native.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as Erinn and Cynthia mentioned, our conversation doesn't end here. So we really would like to continue this important conversation. And again, if you are interested in this Critical Issues Forum, please reach out to me. And if you are not part of the Critical Issues Forum. And I really wanted to thank our speakers today, and also each one of you who participated in today's meeting. And I also wanted to give a big shout out to our graduate research assistant. Without their help, we couldn't have this event. So I really wanted to thank all of you. And yeah, so we really need a new vision for nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. And I would really like to end some positive note that young people ultimate force for change, as you know, as famously said by the Antonio Guterres. So I really hope that each one of you take something away from today's meeting and start something for for good cause, however small it might be. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for spending with us for the Friday evening. Thank you so much, and hope to see you again. Thank you.